Hey guys, welcome to another podcast of Volume 11. This time I have the great honor of having the one and only Scott Henderson. And Mr. Scott over here, he's a guy that has frequently been seen with a Los Angeles Rams hat, and now he has a Miami Dolphins. I wanted to talk to him about that rivalry that he's trying to stir up right on this interview. I don't know why, but Scott, tell us a little bit about that.
From Miami, but I live in LA, so I'm conflicted. You know,
Okay.
teams. But but after the draft, we got some really good players, so I think it's going to be a great year for the Dolphins. I still love the Rams, so we'll see what happens.
Yep,
But
yep. And being a Dolphins fan is rough, so maybe it's a little bit risky for you to get anxious, excited for this.
we don't have a record in the past. We only did good last year,
Yep.
but we got an amazing team now, so we'll see what happens.
Okay. So Scott, I want to start out not only thanking you for accepting the interview, but also talking a little about reflecting about some things on your career. Not only you have the recent Carnival album going on, but you have been a guy with so many different experiences that I wonder what type of decisions do you make to say to tell yourself where your career is gonna go.
For any artist, touring is always better with done record. I mean, people are just more interested. And though I mean, there are bands like Tower of Power who toured for 10 years with no new album, and I've toured for as much as 10 years myself with no new album, and the tours were fine. We had good crowds and everything was okay. But I think business people, managers and agents, when you have a new album, they get more excited about booking. So it's this last tour that I did. I don't think it would have been as long or as successful if I had have just done another album, another tour supporting the People Mover album. So the fact that I had a new record definitely helped.
Yep, yep. And do you have any specific thoughts on how today's musician, today's artist would go about building their own career in the sense of like, would you suggest them going towards giving lessons, towards uh, concerts, towards recordings, have all of them a little bit like dip your toe a little bit in each of those, or what kind of suggestions would you give to
Well,
musicians?
I think it's a little bit of that, but mostly it's internet based, it's social media based now for young musicians. Way more than when I was coming where there was no social media. Now, with Facebook and with all these platforms, you need to be seen on those basically to get a following. I would say it's like actually imperative that you do. You know,
Yep.
very few musicians, new musicians, have become successful without that. They get a big following on social media that helps them to be visible, and that helps them to get calls from people looking for the musicians to play either in their band or whatever. But yeah,
Yep.
that's probably the number one thing that I would suggest young musicians do is to make videos of yourselves playing and post them on the net.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so many musicians, I can't even name so many, but they have started their careers that way.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a starting point because once you get yourself out into the internet, then you can see what kind of things will interest you the most, what things other people will give you feedback on what they like from you. And being an older generation type of guy, how do you feel like you fit into these technologies? And how do you fit in colleagues like yours also try to adapt?
I fit right in. I don't have to adapt because my whole thing is about being modern, So I'm I'm right there with the kids, you know, using technology to do my records. I'm recording on a Mac. I'm doing multiple track layered albums in a way, on a technical level, no different than a Beyonce record, or no different than any pop record.
Yep.
That's going into it. I'm not an old fossil jazz guy who doesn't believe in technology, So, I mean, some of these jazz people, they're making records, and the only thing that makes it a record is that someone was at the session with a microphone. It's actually no different than a live gig. And I have absolutely nothing against those records. I love
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
inspiring it. And I've made some of those records myself, where you just go in the studio and play, and that's the record. It's done as soon as you
Yeah.
walk. But these days, if I'm going to spend all this time composing music, I want to fully realize that music with arrangements and different sounds, different textures, layers, extra guitar parts, just I want to make it more orchestral. So that's something that's modern but it's not really that modern. I mean, guitar players been doing that since Led Zeppelin. Jimmy
Yep.
Page could have, layering his guitars, and Jeff Beck did it. Richie Blackmore did it. Mike Landau does it. It's hardly anything new, but it is more modern than just going in and playing a standard and capturing that on tape and walking away.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have nothing to prove as well, right? Because speaking of that modern kind of thing, you are the guy that did record with the amps, for example, but you have no problem bringing the IRs into your playing. You have the 4x12 Sur amps, but you do have the impulse response on this latest album of yours as well. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the impulse responses are a godsend, not just for the sound, but basically just so I can do what I do. I moved, and as you know, I've been postponing this interview because I was moving,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm much quieter neighborhood where I could never get away with blasting a 4x12 in this neighborhood. The police would be at my doorstep in 2 minutes. So the IRs are more just to let me do my thing without annoying other people in the neighborhood. And really, the cool thing is it actually sounds better because um, if I was recording the right way, the real way, I would play my 100 watt Marshall head into two cabinets with greenbacks, because for every 100 for every watt you want to have 2 watts of speakers. So if I've got a 100 watt head, I want to have 200 watts of speakers, two cabinets with 25-watt speakers, right?
Yep.
I can't do that. I just can't. So I'm playing through one cabinet, and when you turn the amp up past a certain point, the speakers are kind of just choking. You're just blasting them, right? They almost can't take it.
Yeah.
IRs, you don't have that problem. And so that allows me to turn the amp up even louder, and just even a notch, even just a number, gives you a fatter tone. And so I'm actually getting a better sound with IRs than I got with speakers. But it was a pain in the ass to do because it's not just any IR; it's the actual sample of my personal cabinet that I sent to Nashville and had Justin York sample or
Yep.
capture, they say. So he captured that cabinet. We worked for months on matching the tones because it's not easy, because my cabinet I'm used to hearing the cabinet in my room. It doesn't sound the same in his room. So he had to do a lot of different mic placements and experiments to get it to sound exactly the same as what I'm hearing here. So, but after months of working on it, we did it. And you can't hear the difference. In fact, no one would ever tell the difference between the 3 tunes on Carnival that I did with the speaker cabinet and the rest of the album that I did with IRs. So I'm happy.
Yep. So would you say that the music snobs, like call them that, the tone snobs maybe, that are the guys that are 100% into tubes, 100% into vintage equipment, would you say maybe they're a little bit attached to their own emotions and their nostalgia, what's going on there, or maybe they haven't met the right IRs yet? What would you say about that?
I think they haven't met the right IRs yet, because that technology has proven itself now, you know, and it's not just proven itself on my records, but I have friends who have also done albums with IRs and they sound amazing, but they are still using their tube amps, still using a Marshall or a Fender cranked up. And the only thing that's different is the speaker. Now, when it comes to amp modelers, that's a whole different issue, because then you're trying to do something that is, I just don't think it's been done correctly yet,
I
and
see.
to everybody that loves amp modelers, it's not there yet. I've heard them with my own ears. I'm not going to say that it doesn't sound like a real amp, because it does, but I am not able to get my personal sound from an amp model. I haven't yet. Um, and my friends bring them over and they say, yeah, try this, try that. And I sat there for hours trying to dial my sound in. And I'm like, no, I can't make it happen. So the parameters that I'm looking for aren't there. But it's, I'm not saying it won't ever be. I don't think they're there yet.
Okay. I see, I see. And what would you say is essential about your sound and your tone? How much of it is your fingers? How much of it are the equipments that you aren't willing to let go?
It's both. I mean, I'm sure that if I played through someone else's rig, I would still sound like me because of
Okay.
I pick the strings, where I put the pick on the strings, what part of the pick I use. Big difference between using the big part of the pick and the small part of the pick. Huge difference in tone. How hard you hit the strings. Everybody has their own personal touch. Even on an acoustic piano, you can hear the difference between two piano players with different touch. It's all about the touch of the individual musician. That being said, if the gear sucks, so good musicians are always improving both. They're trying to improve their touch and they're trying to improve their gear. And it's a two-way street. You got to do both. One is not, you know, doesn't mean as much without the other.
Yeah, yeah. And on a recent interview I did with Andy Timmons, I thought it was funny because the own location of his home studio has a huge wall of amps, and he has his whole workflow of what type of sounds he wants to get and what amp he's gonna use. I see you as a more simpler guy, where you kind of have your tone, and that's kind of it. Sure, you can go towards different directions, but you kind of like how much would you say that's true?
I say it's fairly true for my main tone. Like when I play a solo, there are a few pedals that I really, really like. RC Booster, the Klon, especially the RC Booster. That's kind of like my sound, like
Yeah, yeah,
very dynamic pedal. Um, I'm not really into I mean, I have a signature pedal called the SH9. It's like a modded uh SD9 sonic distortion. And I love it, but I'm not playing that legato um Holsworth type, style much these
yeah.
days. Used to in tribal tech, I was more into that legato playing all with the left hand and I don't really mean to play legato. Legato is the wrong word because I still play legato. Legato just means you don't pick very much,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's more of like a compression, I guess is what I mean.
I see.
Where all the notes are basically the same volume, when you hear a saxophone player play, unless it's a ballad, you don't really hear a lot of dynamics, you know.
Yeah,
And with a lot of guitar players, like most rock players, you don't hear a lot of dynamics. But in blues,
yeah,
dynamics. And since I'm playing, my music is a little closer to blues or blues mixed with jazz. There's a lot of dynamics in my playing. I want to be able to play really soft notes, and certain pedals won't let you do that. It's like pick as soft as you want, and a loud note comes out. That's what those Tube Screamer, uh, SD9, SH9. That's what those pedals do, and they have a great tone, no doubt about it. But they don't let you play dynamically, and so that's why the RC Booster is my favorite because I can play really soft and it sounds really soft. And I can vary my as much as I want.
yeah. So in many ways, it's like a strong medicine that, as much as it's gonna cure you from X, it might give you the Y. That's not maybe something you're not that interested into, right?
It's a trade off. No matter what you do with gear, you know, eh, you
You
lose
can't have it
something,
all, right? Is that it?
and you gain something just about any time you change any aspect of your gear. You
Yeah.
know, so it's all about what fits the music or what fits the particular part you're playing. In the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And since you said about jazz, I was wondering in the sense of while you were developing your musicality, and then you went through the rock phases and the jazz phases, the blues phases. Were there times of your life where they didn't really walk along? So you would either play a jazz style or a rock style or a blues style, and then you didn't really manage to merge them all at once to make it sound Scott Henderson, or while you were learning them, were you able to implement that to your style?
Well, it's been a while since I was like a jazz student, you know. I
Okay.
mean, way back in the 80s, and when I was really, really interested in bebop and was really immersed, and I think for years, probably for maybe 5 years, all I was doing was just playing tunes out of the real book, no matter what. Like every day, opening up the real book to a new standard and playing that standard, what I could do with that standard. So I was really into that, and I don't know. I lost interest in it somehow along the way. My roots came back, I guess. And I mean, judging from my records, maybe some people would never know that I'd even really been there to that degree of interest in jazz and straight ahead jazz and standards. But I was. And
Yeah.
just because I didn't put those standards on a record doesn't mean that I wasn't really into it. Every day I would be playing giant steps. Every day I'd be playing in Urge or some Wayne Shorter tune from the real book. And I was really, really into it and really trying to develop my jazz or bebop vocabulary. And I'm sure some of that shows in I do today,
It does. It
but
does.
I never thought to make that part of my career. There's enough guys out there playing standards. The world doesn't need me. Um, and they do it better than me. So, I'll let them do it. I do what I do, and which is write my own music and play according to what my music needs. I'm happier that way. It feels more fulfilling to me to be that guy.
Yeah.
But definitely have a lot of respect for guys. I have my favorite jazz players. Kurt Rosenwinkel is really great. Ulf Volcanius, Osteen. These guys. They're amazing, and they're really great players. They can play the shit out of standards to a much greater degree than I can, and I enjoy listening to them. But that's just not what I want to do in my own career.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
then
blue,
what? Go on. Go on. Sorry.
no, I just saying I did Dog Party, kind of like one of the reasons I did Dog Party is just because the tribal tech music was so damn technical. We were using SMPTE back when we were still using tape, and using a SMPTE track to connect MIDI instruments to play during the mix. Very complicated and very technical. I just wanted to get away with that and just go into the studio and play some blues, which I had been doing since I was 17 years old. And that's how the Dog Party album came out. And then as I sort of imagined having a blues career, I realized that no, I don't want a blues career. Because that's just like the whole thing with the standards. It's like I love it, but do I really want to like paint myself into a corner and only do that? It's like no. So as the albums went past Dog Party, I started just like pouring everything that I like into my music, blues, rock, jazz, and not trying to single out any one idiom and stick to it because that's counter creating
Yeah.
to in my in the framework of what I do.
And I imagine when releasing Dog Party, there was probably some mixed reception, right? Because people weren't really expecting a blues album, but a blues rock album came, and then according to the feedback, was that relevant or not for whether you wanted to follow that direction for whether you took your career?
Oh no, I mean I got nothing but good feedback. It won the best blues album of the year in Guitar Player magazine. So I was like, okay. So I mean, I had no doubt that I could play blues in an authentic way. I've been playing blues since I was 12. So,
Yeah.
I
But
wasn't
how about those guys that were in love with tribal tech and wanted the more modern sounding things?
might have been going like, what the hell is he doing? Why is he playing such simple music after he put out all these like this music with complex harmony and stuff like that? I don't really care about people's opinions when it comes to that because I love blues. So if I want to do a blues album, I'll do one. But it was well accepted but usually public opinion doesn't have much to do with what I am going to do next. You know, in fact, it has nothing to do with what I'm going to do next, because whether people like something or they don't like it, what matters is if I like it. And if I feel like, you know, this music is challenging me and it's fun and I'm enjoying doing it, then that's really the only thing that matters to me.
Yeah. And that's the best you have to offer, right? Like it sounds selfish, but if you're doing the best you think you can do for yourself, other people want to see what that's like, right?
It's that if you just stick to what you love and do it as best as you can, you will have fans that enjoy it. You will have people that you'll have an audience. It may not
Yeah.
be as big as the audience you want to have, but but if I wanted a bigger audience, I wouldn't be playing this kind of music. I wouldn't have to play music that had anything to do with jazz or blues. It's
Yeah.
like popular music in our country anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. And speaking from since tribal tech and being involved with keyboard and playing with a keyboard and then making the transition for a trio, for example, how would you say playing guitar is different with and without keyboards?
it's
Because from observing you, we tend to believe you prefer the no keyboard zone every day of the week.
playing with keyboards sometimes. That's again, that's a trade-off. It's like there's some really great things about not having keyboards, because it definitely has made me a better guitarist in overall. I really hardly ever got to play chords in the whole first half of my career, because every band that I was in had a keyboard player, and I was sort of relegated to playing single note lines. And I remember Alan Holsworth complaining about that. Like everything he did as a side man, nobody ever let him play chords, and he was brilliant at that. You know, he had all these beautiful voicings, and it's like amazing, right? But you never heard that side of him until he started doing his own solo projects. And I feel the same way. Like with Tribal Tech, I didn't wasn't able to play much. It you know, as a chord player or harmonicist, I just couldn't. You know, there was no room for it. I was always the saxophone player. So playing trio, you know, and having to come up with all these voicings, and I love you using open strings, because my fingers aren't as long as Alan Holsworth, so I can't make those cluster voicings that he could make. I do it using open strings, so I can have those kind of pianistic voicings, and with notes close together, and being able to explore that territory definitely has made me a better guitarist. But at the same time, it I miss, you know, just have someone playing chords behind me, so I can just play like single note lines and be like a rock guitar player, like, you know, like being that guy that just plays the melody. But now I can do that because we have Lena Stauska playing guitar in the band with us. Not on every tune, but she plays on about 5 tunes. And on those tunes, you know, she can play chords behind me, and I can play single lines. And she also plays solos really good too. So it's nice having that back.
Yeah, yeah. And on that, I'm interested to know about how you feel like you sound live versus on recordings. People that only know you live, which I think it's hard to be honest, but let's say they were only to have watched the show or once or twice you live, and people that have only seen you on heard you on recordings, how would you think they perceive you in different ways?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can definitely say I mean, my live playing, it's hard to say, because sometimes part of me would say, well, I make a lot more mistakes live, but
Okay.
sometimes it's more raw. And in the studio, I can edit myself. If I make a really bad mistake, I can fix it. And maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. You know, some of my favorite solos, the the mistakes are some of the things I like the most. And sometimes I think maybe I shouldn't fix things, but I do. You know, like I hear myself. I hear recordings of me playing live, and sometimes I just go, oh man, I screwed that up. Maybe what I played wasn't what I intended to play, but that doesn't mean that it didn't sound okay. You know what I mean? You can't really, it's very hard to judge yourself, and I don't think anybody should. You know, while you're playing, that is not the time to be judgmental, you know, of whether it was good or whether it was bad, because that sort of sends you into a different type of frame of mind than you should be in when you're playing. You should just let things go, play and let it go. You know what I mean? And move on, and not have somebody on your shoulder telling you, oh, what you just played wasn't good or was good. You know what I mean? It's just like you shouldn't care. It's like, I think Joe Henderson said it best. He says, music happens too fast for you to think about it. So if you're thinking about it, that's not the kind of headspace you want to be in. So I play a lot of things. I'm a guy that takes chances when I play. So not everything that I play was what I intended to play. I tried, but I wasn't able to play what I heard. And then something else comes out. It doesn't necessarily mean that what came out wasn't okay. There is definitely a different energy when you're playing in front of an audience than when you're playing in the studio with nobody there but the band. It's a different vibe. So when someone tells me, oh, we're recording tonight, I'm like, God damn it. Like, really? Because that's going to fuck up my perception of things, you know, because I know I'm being recorded and I'm likely to be nervous. And even at my age, you'd think I would be past that, but I'm not. I'm human, and recording makes me nervous because I'm just not, I don't record myself all that often.
Yeah.
I was more used to it, but I'm not. And I know lots of players who feel the same way. As soon as they know that they're being recorded, something, you know, goes funny in their brain. They go, now there's more pressure on. So that pressure is not usually a good thing because you want to be relaxed when you play.
Yeah. Yeah. And what goes on into playing relaxed? Like, is there any kind of like pre-concert ritual that you might do, or practicing a lot before the show itself, or not practicing the day before?
No, I do like to practice. I like to be really warmed up before I go on stage. So I've always got my guitar with me a couple hours before the show, and I like to play because most musicians, I don't know, but we're all different. So we all have different priorities, but my priority is for my fingers to be really loose and warmed up before I go on stage. Like, I'm right in the middle of my peak playing when I first hit the stage. If I don't warm up, then I feel like I'm not really there until the third or fourth song. Yep. So it's really important for me to play for a couple hours before I hit the stage, and I'm always doing that.
Hours.
Yeah, I do. I bring my loop pedal, and before they open the doors, I'm usually up on stage with my loop pedal just playing and getting warmed up. Yeah. And it helps, I like it. And also just to be in a good mood and just to want to have fun. If you're nervous, I mean, if you feel like it's a special gig and you have to play good on that gig, then you probably won't, because that nervousness will come in. People can see you're nervous, So like if someone says, "Oh, John McLaughlin's going to be in the audience tonight," I mean, most people are going to go, "Oh shit, that makes tonight different than another night when you're just playing for a small room of strangers," right? And it shouldn't be that way, but it is. It's human nature when you know that there's going to be really great musicians watching you, or there's going to be something special about the gig. It's going to be recorded. Those things can make you nervous. I try not to let them make me nervous, and I do a pretty good job, man. I played in front of Joe Zawinul for 4 years, so I don't really have too much to be nervous about, honestly.
Yeah, there's nothing much to go on about when you've gone through that experience, right?
And he was listening to Wayne Shorter for 10 years, and then he had to listen to me for you. So I'm poor Joe.
I'm sure that was great as well, okay? Let's give you props. Let's not be too humble.
I don't get nervous that much, honestly. I don't.
Yeah, yeah.
And plus, I've gone through some therapy. I will definitely be the first one to admit that I needed therapy at some point in my life because I was getting so frustrated with myself on stage. And I had to sort of let some things go, let some expectations of myself go. Because if you have these lofty expectations of yourself, you're judging yourself and you think you're supposed to play like the best you've ever played every night, you're in for a big disappointment. It just doesn't work that way. You know, you're you and you're a different person every night. The things that happen to you during the day affect you play. What you eat affects your playing. How much sleep you got, you know, whether you're hydrated or not. It all comes into, you know, because we're physiological beings. Our bodies are part of who we are. So you can't judge yourself. You just do the best you can and try to be happy with that. And I don't mean that as a fake happiness, because some people say, well, you should never say I'm dissatisfied with my playing. That's bullshit. You want to be dissatisfied with your playing. Otherwise, you won't be inspired to practice and try to get better. You know, it's okay if we're not happy with ourselves, right? I don't think we're supposed to be. But at the same time, you're not supposed to be miserable and not have fun when you play, right? So there's a balance, you know, between being humble and knowing that you have room for improvement and having enough confidence to do the job, to get the job done, and to make good music. You can't make good music if you're nervous. And to quote Miles Davis, he said it best. Nobody said it better than him. Where some interview asked him, how important are the notes? And Miles said, not nearly as important as the attitude of the motherfucker who's playing. And it's like, wow, it can't be said better than that. And it's the absolute truth. You know, if your attitude is in the right place, if you're confident and you're not nervous, and you're gonna be the most creative and you're gonna play your best.
Yes, yes, agreed. And how consistently, because you said that before, how consistently can you access the music that's in your head? How consistently are you able to develop the phrases, and how consistently are you able to think of the harmonies that you're thinking and access those sounds live, for example?
You know what? That has to do with, again, nervousness and rushing yourself. Like when you're nervous, you tend to play more notes and rush yourself. You know, the old blues players where they always say, take your time, take your time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a lot to that. If you take your time and you leave space, the more space you leave, the more time you have to get it together about what you're going to play next, right? When you rush yourself and you feel like you're pushing yourself to play more and more and more and more, and you're not thinking about phrasing as much, or that's when things kind of go downhill for me. So on a good night, when I'm taking my time and when I'm thinking about phrasing and listening to the other players, but that's another big thing. There was a guitar player interview with Bill Frisell, and he talked about the importance of listening, and that's something that guitar players are often guilty of, is not listening. They're only listening to themselves. You know, it's about me, because
And maybe not even that, right? Maybe you're playing without listening to yourself.
players tend to look at their fretboards, and everything that they do seems to be about where your fingers are on the neck. Whereas saxophone players don't see their fingers. You know what I mean? And often keyboard players don't look at their instrument when they play. But guitar players seem to be constantly eyeing their fingers, right? Sometimes that leads to you being led by visually what you see instead of being led by music, by what you hear, right?
Yes.
So that's one of the pitfalls of being a guitar player, that our fretboard is very visible to our eyes. And when we're looking at what we're doing, we're very tempted to go, oh, here's that lick. and, oh, I could do this or I could do that, but it's for the wrong reason. It's because we see it, we see the possibility of it instead of hearing the possibility of it. And if you listen to the other musicians, you find yourself leaving more space, and you get inspired by what they play, especially
Yes.
if you're playing good musicians. So you often play things that you would not expect yourself to play because you got inspiration from something that you heard. That's part of the whole, the whole circle of having a good, not just a good solo, but a good band, good band vibe, good band performance. The audience hears those moments where the band is really communicating with each other. It's all about communication, and without that communication, solos can fall flat. It's just two guys supporting the soloist, and the soloist just playing his shit that he plays every night. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad, but so much more can happen. So
It may go as someone that's trying to show off, right?
it can come off that way. I mean, I definitely have heard solos where if I was to judge my solo afterwards, I would have to say, Jesus Christ, it sounds like I'm just showing off. It doesn't sound like I'm really playing musically. It sounds like I'm just trying to show off the latest shit that I learned. And that's not how I want to play.
Yeah, yeah. And when learning from others, what would you say that like do you transcribe solos, and what would you say if yes, from guitarists and non-guitarists, the ones that gave you like a specific motivation to make you sound better?
Well, I mean, there is a danger to transcribing. The biggest danger is transcribing too much from one person and sounding too much like that person.
Yeah.
That'd be about the worst thing that could happen. But if you transcribe little things from everyone, and that includes people that play your instrument and people that don't play your instrument, trumpet players can learn from guitar players can learn from saxophone players, keyboard players, whatever, right? You're less likely to sound like another guitar player if your main transcriptions are from horn players. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I find myself transcribing horn players way more than guitarists. But that being said, there's a danger to transcription if those things that you're learning become licks that you just sort of play out of context to where you really are in the moment. Because you're supposed to be playing a solo, you're not supposed to be quoting other players, right? You're supposed to be improvising.
Or playing a collection of licks, right?
It's not supposed to sound like a collection of licks. So what I've seen in my own playing and in some of my students playing is when you are able to learn something from somebody, it could be just a small, short 6 to 8 note line or something like that. But when you're able to learn it so well that you're able to play it with different rhythms and, play it as sixteenths, play it as triplets, play it and fit it into what you're doing. In other words, play into it with seamlessly play into it and seamlessly play out of it and morph those rhythms to go with what you're already doing. It doesn't sound like a lick anymore. It sounds like it's just part of you. And that's when it actually becomes useful. But the problem with transcription is people want instant gratification out of their transcription. They want to be able to learn a lick, put it in a suitcase, take it to the gig and use it that night. And it fucking does not work that way. It's just not the way it works. Usually if you try to do that, even if you play the lick without screwing it up, which is very unlikely, it will sound completely out of context with your solo, right? Because it'll sound like you were playing and then insert lick and then
Yeah.
and it'll sound terrible because it's just not the way to do it. So I have to tell my students, don't learn something and expect it just to become yours overnight. You'd have to play that for literally weeks, if not months, to get that line that you learned to be just a completely organic part of what you're doing. And A lot of guys don't have the patience to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but that's what you would have to do to make transcription, the art of transcription, really work in your favor. That would be the only way it would work. Because if you're just trying to collect licks and then play them, that's not the way. That's not the way. That's why a lot of people will say that there are a lot of jazz musicians who just don't, they're not even, they tell their students, don't transcribe, don't do it. Dangerous, right? Because they see them doing it they see too many guys doing it the wrong way, and it makes them sound like crap. It makes them sound like they're just showing off a collection of licks. And so instead of telling them to do it the right way, they just say don't do it at all. And I'm not that kind of a teacher. I would rather say, yeah, do it, transcribe, but do it the right way. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense because you have to tell a story, right? You have to adapt your improvisation depending on what song you're playing, depending on the context of who improvised before you or who's going to improvise after, how many improvisations there's going to be, how the audience is receiving, how well and confident you feel that night. So you feel like if you feel like it's a cake recipe, let's say, then
no, that's bad. I mean, you have to be in the moment, and in the moment is communicating with your fellow musicians. And it's not often that a lick you learned is part of that recipe.
Yeah.
It's really not. It's like, it's
the
foreign,
attitude, right?
it's foreign to the actual, art of improvising, sticking in some lick that you learned, consciously. Unconsciously is a different story. If that lick just comes into your playing without you having to think about it, chances are it might sound good. But if you have to stop and think about putting in a lick, then that's not the right frame of mind you should be in when you're playing at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say you have a specific way of not necessarily thinking, but a process of developing your solos? Like while the solos is approaching, do you plan on easing it in, or like what type of things goes through your improvisations?
Kind of common sense, take your time when you start, have somewhere to go. Don't play too much at the beginning, just have it build. And of course, I'm not talking about that 70s thing where every solo starts with less notes and then it builds into this orgasmic climax of a million notes at the end and it's loud as fuck. That's kind of a dated concept. And I'm not saying that we don't have some tunes that do that, but if you do that every tune, it's predictable as hell and it's boring, right? So some tunes need to just be able to have maybe a climax in the middle and then come down or some solos just kind of stay. They don't get louder or softer. They just kind of float along. There's a lot of Scofield albums where I feel like the solo is not at all designed to build. It's just kind of going along. It's grooving, because Scofield's music is kind of groovy, so if it gets frantic and gets fusiony, it destroys the groove. And that's not what he wants. So it doesn't build and doesn't get, I mean, some of his solos do, of course. Yeah. Some of everybody's solos do, but there are a lot of tunes that I've listened to when Sco is playing, and it's just kind of moving along it's not building. It's not trying to get into a frantic ending. And we have tunes like that too, where I don't want the guys to get louder at the end. It's just not the way I want to do it. It doesn't, it's too predictable when you do it all the time.
Yeah.
So that being said, the purpose isn't necessarily to have the solo go from point A to point B in some kind of like building way, but just to be interesting throughout, so that could mean dips in velocity, like just like it gets really soft for a while, then it gets louder, then it gets soft again, because the guys really react. And that's one thing I love about playing with Archie and Romaine. They really react, and that's another thing about the RC Booster. It allows me to play soft notes. If I play a soft phrase, they're right there with me. They come down, you
Yeah.
know, and then we have these musical moments where I don't know, it's just it creates interest. Dynamics in general create interest in a solo. So when we have those kind of moments where we're sort of listening to each other and the dynamics change or the intensity level changes within the solo, it's all interesting, and it doesn't have to have this predictable, you
Yes.
know, thing happening. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that
That
answers your.
makes a lot of sense. I was watching for the thousandth time that Brecker Brothers live in Barcelona, and not every
Man,
song they're getting to the climax at the very end. But when they
no,
do, holy hell, do they
uh,
catch me off guard?
that's what makes it cool when you do it every once in a while. It creates a really strong energy. But if you do that on every single song, it gets to be really predictable, and that's what is expected of every single solo.
Yeah.
That's when I was in Chick Corea's band. He was super guilty of that. Every single solo started soft and ended really loud with frantic, but it's a 70s thing. That's how fusion kind of, or if you listen to old Mahavishnu records, most of the solos do that. They start from very soft and they end up very loud. And it's dated.
Yeah.
It's They're great, like there's no, I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just saying you don't want to do it every single time you play.
Yeah, I can definitely see what you mean, especially listening to more modern music where everything is loud all the time. How do you
Yeah.
feel with the new generation of guitarists that have that kind of sound and the music in general as well, the rock music, the whatever it is, and then what would you say catches your attention in a different direction from all this modern music?
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not very much of an expert in modern bands. I don't hear a whole lot that I like. I'm a Zeppelin fan, right? And to me, like a band like that, when you have great songs, you have great dynamics, you have beautiful textures in the guitars. What modern band is doing that? Am I missing something? But I don't hear it. I'm not hearing it. Like it definitely isn't U2. I can tell you that. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I think they suck. I can't even listen to that music. It doesn't even sound like music to me. Sorry, but
Okay.
that kind of corporate rock, I just don't. I'm like when I compare that to Led Zeppelin, I just go, what are people thinking? How can they like this? You know, I
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm missing. Maybe there's something I'm missing. I don't know. But there are a lot of bands that you know when when I hear them play, I go, where are the melodies? Where are the great songs? Where are the dynamics? Where are the cool tones? I don't hear it.
Yeah.
So and I'm not saying there aren't bands out there that have that, but I don't know who they are. Somebody tell me, and I'll listen to them.
Yeah. Leave them in the comments and I'll redirect them to Scott Henderson once we have a good list. Because I also don't know how to answer this
You know what?
in
I
this
like
moment.
Tool. I like Tool. That's a
Okay.
cool. They have a lot of really textural shit going on. Their guitar player is really good. He has a very cool sense of sounds and
Yeah.
textures, and I like them. Like
Yeah.
it's a band. That's a modern band I can listen to. I think they're very musical.
I could tell you Steven Wilson, but he's not all that modern.
Uh, I like some music I've heard by Black Crows. Um,
Yes.
some of that stuff is pretty cool. Sounds kind of vintage though. It's not
Yeah.
what I would call modern because they've got a vintage vibe. Maybe that's why I like it. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 And in that sense, I know your influences, especially on the lines of like Steve Ray Vaughan, Jeff Beck, and Schofield, and I imagine how much you admire them. At the same time, I wonder if you realize that there are many people that look at you the same way. As one of your biggest influences, they look at you as one of their biggest influences, and as one of, for example, the founders of fusion, especially on guitar. I would dare to say that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I don't know why they would think that.
God, come on, dude. Okay, you can be humble, but you have to also accept that you have done a lot. So wouldn't that make sense?
I guess. I mean, I'm not my own biggest fan, that's for sure. I'm a pretty humble guy. I mean, there's so many amazing guitar players out there. I have a hard time thinking of myself as one of them, honestly. Um, like I was listening to Junior Brown the other day, and I was going, why am I even attempting to play the guitar? You know, like he's so brilliant. You know, like there's just so many guys. Um, I can just literally Tommy Emmanuel, like really? Why do I even bother?
So, if you listen to your music, do you not find that pleasurable or
No, I do. I see myself actually more as a stylist. I'm not a virtuoso. I'm just a stylist, I think. And my guitar playing fits into the music that I write. And I like the music that I write, otherwise I wouldn't write it. And I sort of look at myself as a sort of like a player who just plays to fit the music. I don't really consider myself a giant among guitar players at all, but but you know, I sort of look at the whole picture of what I'm doing as a composer and a producer, and a guitar player is a part of it, of course, but it's just a part of it. It's like I don't really feel like people buy my albums just so they can hear me solo, because my solos aren't all that great to me, you know. But when you put them in the context of all the music and all the production and the sounds that are going on, I hope I'm presenting a package that's worthy,
yeah?
and that's all I really care about, you know. Um, there are a lot of guitar players with 10 times my chops, and you know, I'm sort of a jack of all trades and master of none. I mean, I can play rock, but I'm no Eddie Van Halen. You know,
But for example,
I
couldn't you say
play
the same
jazz.
thing about Jimi Hendrix, for example, that there are guys that plays better and more chops than him, but at the same time he is Jimi Hendrix, and that's all you have to say.
Jimi Hendrix was a master phraser, you know, and to this
And
day,
then when we're talking about playing outside, for example, or having a blues feel and a blues tone while playing jazz fusion, don't you feel like you're that guy?
well, that's one of my strong points, I guess, is I can play out pretty good, and I have a um you know, I'm a melodic player most of the time, so I'm not really down on my guitar playing. I just look at other players, and I have so much respect for my guitar heroes, you know, like Wes Montgomery
Yeah.
and Lenny Breau and Philip Degree, who's unbelievable, and like and Kurt Rosenwinkel, and there's just so many guys. Schofield, of course, Pat Metheny, really great players that I admire. So it's hard for me to, you know, I know that I can do things that they can't,
There
and
you go. We're getting
yeah,
there.
everybody has things that they do that are them, but I don't really concentrate on like ranking myself among.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I just want people to enjoy what they hear, and I'm fine with that. I it's sort of like, let's leave it at that. I'm not trying to win any polls.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I
So
just I just want to do what I do, and let the music speak for itself. And like I think that if I was to put myself out there in the world without my music to support me, like in other words, if I did an album of standards, I think people would see that I'm not the jazz player that a lot of these guys are. I'm not. I don't have the amount of jazz vocabulary that many of the jazz players do. So, but like I said, um, one of the things I love about being me is that I get to enjoy so many different kinds of music, whereas some musicians, they tend to just wrap themselves up in a little bubble, and they only listen to the music that they play. Like like there's some jazz guys that I won't name them, but I can name them, but I won't. But they are fossils, man. They're stuck in the 40s. You know, they don't listen to anything but the music from the jazz from the 40s and 50s, and that's all they listen to. And there's metal guys that they only listen to metal. That's all they listen to. Rap guys that only listen to rap. I feel sorry for them, honestly. They're missing so much because there's great music in every idiom: country, rap, pop, jazz, blues, country, everything.
Yep.
There's amazing music, and not having a label and not having anybody tell me what to do, I get to say, hey, I'm gonna write a country tune, or I'm gonna write a tune that's more influenced by pop or funk or R&B or heavy metal or vintage classic rock or jazz or blues. I get to do anything I want to do, and I get to enjoy it. And so if I'm not the best bebop jazz player or the best rock player or the best blues player, I don't care.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I just get to experience all that music and enjoy it. That's all that matters to me.
Yep. And I think, yeah, and that's more than good enough. That's amazing, actually. I feel like I'll be honest with you, I think you're being too excessively humble, so make sure you give yourself more
I,
credit.
I don't hate myself, put it that way. I don't hate
No,
myself,
no,
but
yeah.
I can't get into this thing. I'm all that uh frame of mind because there's too many great musicians. Like every time I'm in my car and I'm listening to Weather Report, I'm going, holy shit, man, that's on another level.
But I think you are, and by the way, you're not gonna change my mind, so let's move on
Hey,
from that.
that's
And
all. Yeah, more.
and by the way, that being said, since you have that feedback of admiring other musicians in many different ways, is there something you that would have done different in your career? Because I think it was on a guitar player, for example, on an interview you did there, that once you said you thought it was a mistake to dive deep into fusion. So is there something you would have done differently and that would still like to accomplish?
I don't even know what fusion is these days because in my mind, almost every kind of music is some kind of fusion.
Yeah.
And that word got a bad rap because of people that I guess made fusion into sort more like a commercial money making endeavor. Like
Kenny G.
that comes to mind, though I have nothing against Kenny G. I'm not really a fan of the music. I don't really like that kind of music that much because it's just a little benign to me. It's just kind of, it's sort of kind of the music you hear in elevators and in a dentist's office, so it doesn't attract me too much. But not because of its simplicity at all, because I love simple music. I mean, I like ZZ Top, and that's Kenny G's music is probably more sophisticated harmonically than ZZ Top. Why do I like ZZ Top more? Because it's edgy. It's got an edge. And Kenny G's music has no edge. It's as dull as a butter knife, right? So but there's room for everybody. And there's a lot of people that love Kenny G. But I think the word fusion, it got relegated to that kind of music, Kenny G and the Rippingtons and that kind of music that to me, real fusion is just a word that you mix ketchup and mustard together. That's fusion, right? Mahavishnu Orchestra was sort of like a fusion of rock and jazz and Indian music.
Yep.
Gentle Giant is a fusion of rock and classical music. Like yes, it's all fusion to me. A lot of like some fusion is Latin music mixed with Latin music mixed with jazz, and that's a different kind of fusion. So it's all fusion to me. And of course, my music is because I'm mixing lots of stuff together: blues, rock, uh, jazz, funk, especially funk, because I was playing in a band for years that played nothing but James Brown and Kool and the Gang and R&B, Motown stuff. So I'm really influenced by that music. So yeah, I forgot what the question was. Oh yeah, no, there's not a time where I said, "Oh, I'm sorry I got into this kind of music." I'm not sorry I got into anything because everything has brought me some degree of joy, every kind of music that I've listened to. The only music that hasn't really done much for me is rap. Like I occasionally hear some rap music where I think, wow, those cats are really creative, right?
Yeah.
And the music, I'm not talking about the vocals, but I'm talking about the music itself, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because the vocals are always relevant in rap music because they're talking about something that's important to them. So of course that's important. But I'm talking about the music under the vocals. Sometimes I hear some rap music I feel is really creative, really done well. But most of it, I have to say, it sounds like it was done with an app.
Yep.
It doesn't sound creative at all. It sounds cookie cutter,
Yeah.
right? And that's the kind of rap music I don't like very much. And I have to say, I've heard more cookie cutter bullshit than I've heard really creative cats coming up with really, because a lot of those guys, they're not even musicians, they're DJs,
Yeah.
right? They're just getting samples and putting them together. And they've done it so much and used the same samples over and over and over. It all tends to sound the same.
Yeah.
Sounds very cookie cutter.
And they'll loop the beats forever, right? So where's the dynamic
Time.
going?
But I have heard some that I would go, whoa, that is some interesting shit, really cool
Yeah.
shit. So I'm open minded to it. I just haven't heard a lot that really, caught my ear in a creative way,
Yeah.
like I've heard from in other kinds of music.
I'll send you some Kendrick Lamar and Kanye West later. Because yeah, as an instrument player, I also had a hard time getting into rap in many ways because the lyrics are so and the vocals are so much more important than the beats that's behind them. But at the same time, they have the attitude that I feel like sometimes and many times the rock and the jazz guys and the blues guys they're missing nowadays, and I'm there like, guys, so if you want to cry about your music and why in many ways it might be going nowhere, maybe it's the attitude. Try having a look at these rap guys that they're not afraid of saying what they mean.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you, and up to a point for sure. I've even heard some blues music that doesn't sound heartfelt. You know, it doesn't sound like they're really authentic because blues is sort of being about being aggressive and not and fearless, right? And some blues that I've heard, it's too pretty. It's not it's not edgy enough. It doesn't feel like they're taking any risks or taking any chances. Where, when someone like Albert King picks up the guitar, it's raw. And or Stevie Ray or Hendrix,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's that rawness to it that you feel like they're just out on a ledge all the time. And I love that, right? And I'm one of those guys too. Is I I'm gonna risk it. I'm gonna fall on my ass, I'm sure, but I'm gonna risk it anyway. It's just the way I was brought up to play, and you can't take you can't play it safe. There's not much fun in playing it safe.
Yep. And to start wrapping up the interview, I'm really curious. I know you've received this question a trillion times, but maybe the person you are today, you might give a slightly different answer. What's your routine like when you pick up a guitar or when your day starts? What kind of things are you going to go about for how
I don't
long?
know.
And how has that changed?
That's changed a lot since I started doing albums, I guess. When I was a student, and I'm not saying I'm not a student now because we're all students till we die. We're always accumulating vocabulary. We're always trying to improve our playing. So in a sense, we never stop being students. But when you actually start making your own music and your fans are waiting for you to put out another album, everything becomes about that. It's I don't have the luxury of sitting home all day and practicing on all the things you are. And there's a part of me that misses that. It's like, yeah, it would be great if I had all day to improve my jazz chops, but I need to write. Like that's what I need to do. I need to be composing because it takes a long time, at least for me, to be satisfied enough with a tune to want to put it on an album. So I have to do that. And it's like sometimes I would honestly rather be doing something else. I'd rather be practicing. I'd rather be like shedding giant steps because I love playing that tune and I love playing a lot of standards, but I don't have time for that. I feel like what people expect of me and what I expect of myself is to write another album that's better than the last one. That's my mission in life, right? So, and the playing will be based on what those tunes need. So if I write a set of changes to play over, I'm going to shed the shit out of those changes until I feel like I've really nailed them. Or if it's like a one chord vamp at a certain tempo or groove, I'm going to shed on that. So basically, everything that I'm practicing is project based rather than just general good player based. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's based on the project. So now Carnival's over. It's time to start a new project, and everything that I do as a musician will be based on that project.
Yep, and that sounds awesome. That's the best. Yeah, as a fan, I think that's what we want you to do the most, and you're absolutely spot
Thing I
on.
know how to do anymore, man, honestly.
It's like that endless desire of please do this forever. You know, please continue putting out music until you can, until your the best of your abilities come, and
That's
and
all
will
I
be.
I enjoy doing it. You know, the thing is, it's a labor of love because I really do enjoy it. I have fun. Writing is challenging. It's always like fucking hard as hell, and I don't always. I'm frustrated a lot. You know, there was a composer that said, if you're having a great time composing, you're probably writing a piece of shit. So there is some frustration, definitely. You know, when you sit there in the chair all day and you come up with one measure, and
Yeah.
you know, it's always that tomorrow's another day. We're going to try again. But in general, as the weeks go by and a tune starts to form, it's probably one of the most exciting and exhilarating and inspiring things a musician can do is write. You know, so I really love it. And I know that a lot of my fellow jazz musicians probably would just rather play Stella by Starlight than put themselves through that shit.
Yeah.
Right. And all power to them. I don't
Yeah.
blame you, dude, at all. I don't blame you one bit. But because it's a hard world. But I'm doing it. That's what I do.
Yeah. To finish this off, I'd like to ask you one last question, which is by not only a question, but also giving a few of the messages that some people asked me to give. So, Andy Timmons said that you guys need to go out to a Japanese barbecue like you guys did in LA back in the days
Yeah.
once again.
Yeah.
um,
I love
Tonio,
Andy. So he's another monster player, man. That guy plays his ass off.
yeah.
Incredible
We were
guitar.
talking about melodies. He's the best melody maker I know, so.
He's amazing, man. He's amazing.
Toninho Horta sends his greetings and he thanks you for helping him choose his green guitar from
Oh,
a
great. Oh,
Manny's he bought in New York also
oh,
back in the
cool.
day.
I love Andy. He's one of the guys. He's one of the rock players that I really respect. I mean, he's got it all. He's got tone. He's got phrasing. He's got chops. You know, just you know, he's truly one of the greats for sure.
And the last one, that's the one that I'm going to tie to the very last question as well, is Michael Pipoquinha. He was saying about the day you guys were at Scott Kenzie's wife birthday party that you guys met, and he was with Pedro Martins. You told him how the first time you saw him was also very long ago when he had different hair and things like that, and he'd absolutely never imagined you'd like his music.
Oh
So
yeah, man. I mean, those guys, they're all so good. I was just talking to Kinsey the other day about all those cats from Brazil. So many great players, and Pedro, he's another one of my favorite guitarists. Like he's one of the young generation's best guitar players. You know, very influenced by Wayne Shorter. He's got all the chord melody thing happening. He's lyrical. There's a thing on YouTube that I saw that blew me away. It's him playing a piece by Ravel, and he's soloing over it. He's managed to loop some of it, and he's soloing over it with some kind of synth sound, but is absolutely fucking breathtaking. It's just on another level. And yeah, Pedro's one of the giants. I love him. You know, great
yep.
guitar.
Yep. And then, yeah, that was going to be the question pretty much. Do you have anything to say about Brazilian musicians and Brazilian music in general?
I just said it.
That's it. Okay, so we're going to finish it up here. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm so glad that the young generation guys are the ones getting the credit as well for and being Brazilian as well, right?
Yeah, man. really happening. Some incredible players, and always has been, you know. But now they're really starting to surface in America. We're finally starting to hear about these guys because a lot of them live here now. So that's one thing about international musicians. When someone lives in a country outside of the United States, we don't always hear about them, you know. But when their music finally crosses over and we get to hear about them, we're like, oh shit! Like years, I never heard of Ufstein. He's a Danish guitar player,
Yeah.
and he's a complete badass, like just unbelievable, beautiful player. And just in the last 10 years, I've gotten to know his playing pretty well. And he came to one of our shows in Europe this last tour, and I got to meet him in person. It was a big, really thrilling experience for me to meet him, because I'm a big fan. And yeah, it's the same like for some of the, just no matter where it is, Brazil or anywhere else, we don't always hear these guys until they make themselves known in the States.
Yep.
And now we're finally starting to see some of these Brazilian musicians, and they're playing with people like Scott Kenzie, and we get to hear them, and they're amazing.
Yep. Yep. So, Scott, thank you so much for the interview. It was a blast talking
My
to you.
pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm sorry about the delay. Like I wanted to do this sooner, but moving is a bitch. So
I wanted to make sure we did it when you felt best, so that you wouldn't be
yeah,
annoyed at doing something you didn't feel like doing. And I hope I could have made good questions and made you
yeah,
minimally have a good time.
I had a great time, and like ever since we got off the tour, I think we got home on April 16th. I've been moving ever since then. Like, still, most of my shit is in boxes still, but I finally have my studio up and running again, and yay!
Yeah.
That was the hardest part. But now, I'm finally moved in and everything's good, and so yeah. Thank you for waiting and being so patient with me.
No, no. I'm the one that will thank you. And would you like to leave a final message to the audience of what they can expect from you, or to follow you, or to buy courses, or have lessons with you,
To be
anything like that?
honest, I wish I knew. I don't know what I expect of myself. I just hope that I can come up with something decent. That's about it.
Okay. Okay, so that's amazing. And to everyone that has watched up until here, please follow the channel, subscribe, follow me at Instagram at Vilela Volume 11. And until the next time, we'll be here. Bye bye.
Okay. Ciao. Thanks.
Ciao, ciao.